an hour and 15 minutes. And in the afternoon, we continue with a presentation by Lukáš Burget and his team on building speech recognition systems from untranscribed data. And that presentation, again, will go on till about 4:30. And at the end of that, we'll adjourn just for the day. And we'll resume tomorrow, and we'll continue with the presentations of the third team, which is working on detecting risk and protective factors for mental health using social media linked with electronic health records. And this team is led by Christy Hollingshead, and she and her teammates will present tomorrow morning. So we have a day and a half program. So without further ado, let's get started. So let's say we get rid of this guy. Actually, I'll just minimize it. And we go to my presentation. All right. So like I said, I just want to give you a very quick summary of how we started this workshop. And maybe I won't take too much time talking about the accomplishments because I don't want to steal the thunder from the teams. So I'll just really give you just a very, very brief summary of it. So as you know, these workshops aren't just something that happen in 6 weeks over here or 8 weeks over here. They require year-long organization by pretty much the whole community. We start in September with a call for proposals, then we have a meeting to figure out, well, after that we get proposals and do some preliminary triage, then we have a community meeting with the proposers and other peer reviewers, pick a few teams, pick the team leaders, senior people, graduate students, undergrads. All along in parallel, we raise money for the workshop. Then we start setting up infrastructure, including databases and computational things and baseline systems and so on and so forth. And then once summer comes around in June, we also have a 2-week summer school where we try to bring the students all up to speed and get them to learn about the other teams as well as all the other things going on in HLT. And then the main workshop is 6 weeks over here. And by the time we finish in August, it's time to write up reports and start the next year's cycle. So last year we began, as usual, with a call for proposals. Here is a very quick glance. I don't intend for you to read the whole thing, just so to give you a sense of what was there. It was posted and the deadline was October. We were looking for proposals in speech, NLP, computer vision, and new for this year, language and healthcare. We solicited a lot of people for these proposals, direct email, calling friends and colleagues, or just people who we thought had good ideas. And this resulted in 25 odd proposals. We did some triage and invited 15 of them for a meeting. One of them withdrew later, so we went to our final discussions in November with 14 proposals on the table. We had authors, potential sponsors, government program managers, basically community stakeholders were all there. And we reviewed, discussed, triaged, strengthened, and finally settled on a few proposals by peer review. And this peer review, as I said, had the authors. There were 18 non-authors, a few JHU faculty were there, and the stakeholders came from government, DARPA, DoD, FBI, IARPA, NSF, and from industry, from Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, IBM, Microsoft, Mitsubishi. And if you just want to think about the demographics, there were about close to 50 people, well, whatever, 40-some people, and they were half from academia, a third from industry, and the rest. I don't put JHU in academia because in some sense we are organizing more than judging or reviewing proposals, although we play a dual role there anyway. And the 3 teams that were selected this year, the first one, its title is Detecting Risk and Protective Factors for Mental Health, as I just said earlier, from social media posting. Sorry? Oh, you have a shorter title, which is, well, Christy will tell you about the shorter title tomorrow. Then the second one was about monitoring neurodegeneration through speech, and the third was building speech recognition systems. So what I've listed here are all the participants, and this sort of amazes me. Every time I see this list, I think of all the people who come here to spend their valuable time and effort to work together. And it's always amazing to see this group. So the first line typically are senior people who are here full time. They really spend 6 or 8 weeks a year. The second line are all the students. And the third line are many people who, for various family or work constraints, couldn't really be here for 6 to 8 weeks, but who are very integrally involved with the team, and they made key contributions. So I'm listing them as affiliates, if you want to call it that, but really they're part of the team. So basically, these people are all key to each team, and I've color-coded them just for fun. I like to do these things once in a while. But if you want them by statistics, the workshop had 50 people, about 3/4 men, 1/4 women. We did okay on the student-senior people balance, roughly half and half. We did okay on the balance with academia and industry. We didn't get a government participant this year, but that varies from year to year depending on the projects. And if there's a government lab with direct interest, then we have people from the government participating as well. Pretty interesting breakdown when it comes to US versus non-US. We have a pretty robust non-US presence in the workshops. So although many of the workshops, in fact, all the workshop sponsors are US companies or agencies, but they really are serving the entire speech and language community. So the workshop really has participation from all over the world. So there are 30 different institutions from which we've had people at the workshop. And these demographics, by the way, are updated from my opening day slides, because at that time I had a whole lot of people who I thought might come or might not come. But today I can tell you exactly who was here for these 6 weeks. And so this is a much more accurate tally. And it's amazing, 30 different institutions, 50 people, which means that on average, there was only, whatever the number comes out to be, 1.6 people per institution or whatever it comes out to be, right? So it's not like a whole group from a university comes and works here. We really tried to put together very diverse teams. It's still US dominant, but not only so much. Only 15 US institutions and 15 non-US. So that's a pretty nice balance again, I think. And of course, anything like this requires a lot of resources. So the resources come from many people. Like I said, Microsoft, DARPA, Amazon, Facebook, Google. And I shouldn't forget to mention, Johns Hopkins puts in a lot of organizational effort as well. So it's not like the costs that come in from the sponsors cover everything, but our dean, our faculty, they all believe in this mission. So we put in a lot of our time and effort, including the facilities here. So those come to us free of cost from the School of Engineering. Okay. So these are the people. Here's what we did in these last 8 weeks. We started on June 13th. So the students probably remember this day, the first day they walked into this room and started the summer school. We had 2 weeks of intensive, I'd call it education or training or simply exposure to all sorts of ideas in speech and language. We had instructors from 10 different institutions come and give lectures and conduct labs in all aspects of speech and language technology, speech representation, speech recognition, generally deep learning, machine learning more generally as well, NLP, information extraction. Each team had a day to discuss what their team's mission is and what their goals are and how things work. And then we got into the main workshop. So we had an opening presentation on June 27th. Then we worked like crazy for 6 weeks. And now we are here for the final presentation. But while going through these 6 weeks, we had a lot of fun on the way. So every Wednesday, we had a plenary speaker from outside. These are people who are not exactly in our area. They're close by, but they have interesting things to tell us. So we had Guillermo Cecchi from IBM, Milos Chernak from IDIAP, April Foreman from the Veterans Administration in New Orleans, Jacek Mostwin from our School of Medicine, who has been a big advocate for thinking about healthcare and medicine from the recipient's perspective. And finally, Rebecca Resnick, who's a practicing psychologist who talked to us about her experience working with people with mental health problems. So these people helped us broaden our thinking and think a little bit more differently about the kinds of things we work on and its utility and its application. And of course, what I haven't put down here is every Thursday we went to have dinner. We went to eat steamed crabs. Of course, you're in Baltimore, so you have to do that. And we went to Ethiopian places, Afghan places. We had a lot of fun. And the other thing I didn't mention is every Friday we had special cookies and ice cream. So a good time was had by all. But more than good time, let me just say what were the main take-home messages. So at a technical level, Elmar's team is going to tell you about how they were able to look at speech and language and try to assess the neurodegenerative health condition of patients. The top level findings, as you might expect, Parkinson's is sort of affects the motor system. So there's a lot of signal in the speech of the person about their disease condition. So that was found and confirmed. Same thing with Alzheimer's. It's mostly a cognitive effect. So there was a lot of influence in the language produced by these people. So you can look at text, or you can think of it as linguistic cues or linguistic information. What's interesting though is the other side also works. Speech also is interesting when you look at Alzheimer's and linguistic text retrieval, what kind of word usage happens, is also interesting for people dealing with Parkinson's. So you'll hear more about that from Elmar. Lukash's team developed a nice framework and implemented all parts of it, or most parts of it, for an end-to-end, fully Bayesian, unsupervised learning framework for speech. So the idea is I just give you lots and lots of speech and some unrelated text in a language, and that's all you do, and you take that and try to build a speech recognition system in that language. So several important components saw improvements in the unsupervised learning methods. You'll hear a little bit from Mirko about grapheme to phoneme learning when you really don't have any dictionaries or anything like that. You'll hear from Santosh about how you can do topic ID when you have no speech recognizer at all, and so on and so forth. So a lot of interesting key components were sort of uncovered, interesting algorithms were developed. And finally, when you're doing completely unsupervised learning, it's difficult to figure out how to measure something. So you could measure end-to-end word error rate, but if your system doesn't know the concept of words, what are you going to measure? So it turns out that we can actually evaluate these systems with intrinsic measures like mutual information between the string that your recognizer produces and the string of phonemes that represent the ground truth. And you can compute things like mutual information or other correlation measures. And they track very well with some extrinsic measure that you might have. So for example, if you wanted to do keyword spotting, or if you wanted to do topic detection, these measures, which are measuring intrinsic components of the system, also correlate with what the system is eventually intended for. So you'll find some things about that. Christie's team got a lot of input from a lot of clinical people. So in fact, one of the things I haven't said is that in addition to that group of 16 people who are team members, they had a weekly clinical panel of practicing clinicians and others who would meet with them by teleconference and discuss their findings, inform them about what they thought might be useful in practice. And so in a nutshell, they found that clinically meaningful information can be derived from language usage in social media. You can get psychological trends, or you can forecast psychological trends. You can in fact predict sort of, let's call it life events, with some significant accuracy just by looking at how people use social media. So if you want to know how that happened, come back tomorrow morning and listen to our team. So I'll leave it at that, except to say that I myself have a few other take-home messages from this. I've been involved with these workshops along with some of my JHU colleagues for more than a decade. And this workshop was noteworthy in several respects. I'm quite happy that we've made a substantive and non-trivial inroad or foray into healthcare applications of human language technology. Both the teams you'll hear from, one today and one tomorrow morning, will tell you how speech and language are quite integral to us as human beings, and so it's not surprising that they tell us a lot about our health and our state of health, and can be useful in diagnosing, understanding, monitoring our health. On the speech recognition side, I think this is really bold. In fact, it's borderline crazy to say that I'll learn a speech recognition system in a completely unsupervised way. So I thought it was quite daring and fun to do that, and you'll see how things turned out. They actually turned out quite well, given the challenge of the problem. And so many of the threads that were pursued in all the three teams are very promising. So at this stage, I can't stand up and say, what's that thing? I can't put a banner behind me saying mission accomplished and say we're done. That's always a dangerous thing anyway, as we know from one of our past precedents. But nonetheless, I don't have that. On the other hand, I'm also remembering how the team that eventually ended up creating Moses, or the team that came up with iVectors, or the team that finally came out with Kalbi, those teams were in similar states at this time, meaning there were lots of promising little bits and pieces. So it's worth watching to see how these teams turn out in the next year or so. The other thing that was different about this workshop, I think it's finally starting to sink into me and everybody in the community that industry has really stepped up in this field. We used to be reliant 100% on government funding when the workshop started 20 years ago. Now we're much further along, and we have more than equal partnership with 3/4 of the funding coming from industry. And so what do we want to do in the future? Well, we'll keep going. 2017, we have a couple of possibilities. We're going to alternate the workshop between Hopkins and somewhere else. And we have one possibility of taking it to Pittsburgh, to Carnegie Mellon. Another very intriguing possibility is to take it to Zurich. I don't know which one will pan out at this point. We'll know by November when the planning meeting happens. So keep an eye on that and see how it goes from there. All we need is for the community to come up with a few good ideas. So let me very quickly thank our sponsors. First of all, Microsoft, then DARPA, Amazon, Facebook, and Google, in no particular order. But they're all extremely valuable and extremely helpful to us. So thank you, everybody. And actually, thanks to all the people in these organizations who lobby for us, for all of you over here, saying this is a good activity, we should support it. So thanks again. And finally, since we've named the workshop after Fred, I always think of him at times like this, saying he'd be very happy to see all of you here doing all these wonderful things. So let me end on that note. Thank you.